from your hometown election headquarters. This is a special edition of Q6 Local News.
KHQ is your hometown election headquarters. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm Claire Graham. The polls close in Idaho in just a few hours, and you have about 4 hours left to turn in your ballot in Washington state. In just a moment, we will check in with Kip Hill and Jim Camden from the Spokesman-Review about what to watch for tonight. But first, we'll go to KHQ's Joe McHale, who has spent the day following Lisa Brown and Congresswoman Cathy McMorris-Rogers. Joe?
The Spokane Elections Office says so far, voters are making for a record turnout. The 5th Congressional District race between Lisa Brown and Cathy McMorris-Rogers is forcing the election.
I believe we're having some kind of technical difficulties. Excuse me. We're going to get his microphone situated, and then we should have more information for you. But at this point, we have several races we are following. I believe we can go. Can we go to Kip Hill from the Spokesman-Review? Kip, you've been following the District 5 race for months now. That's between Cathy McMorris-Rogers and her Democratic challenger Lisa Brown. Can you sort of tell us what's going to happen in this race?
Well, I think most national outlets are looking at it, most national pollsters are looking at it as a likely Republican district. But clearly, Lisa Brown's put up a fight that we haven't seen from a Democrat against Cathy McMorris-Rogers really since she was elected since 2004. We're talking both in terms of money, in terms of interest, in terms of votes that we saw in the primary. So really, these two candidates have known that they're going to go against each other since the time Lisa Brown announced in August that she was going to be running for that seat as a Democrat. We saw a lot of other Democrats get out of the race after that because of her sort of stature. So we've had two known commodities here. They spent a lot of money. They've run a lot of ads. They've been out the last couple of weeks knocking on a lot of doors and drumming up support. So I think we're obviously seeing significant interest in this race in terms of you could say these early ballot returns are indicative of people want to vote in this race. They've known who they've wanted to vote for a while. It's really just been about getting out for each of these candidates the people that will support them at the polls.
Well, Kip, what do you looking back throughout this race? I know we've seen so many ups and downs. Can you sort of tell us maybe what the most important highlights were that you think?
Well, I think, at the very beginning, there was a lot of rumors that Lisa Brown was going to jump into this race. I think a lot of people saw President Trump as potentially vulnerable in this district, despite the fact that he won it by double digits. I think certainly the Democrats looked at that as evidence that they might be able to pick up some ground in the congressional race. You've got Representative McMorris-Rogers, who's had a somewhat off and on relationship with the president, criticized him for a few of his policies on trade, some of the things that he said on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, but is really sort of, and especially in the last few weeks, invited some of his surrogates to town to do fundraising. So really, I would say that, the main points in this race were Lisa Brown entering in August, and for the first few months there, it was pretty clear that these two were running against each other. And in the summer, it's clearly been that contest, both in terms of the ads that have ran and just the way these candidates have tried to present themselves.
Gotcha, Kip. Well, that's Kip Hill speaking to us from the Spokesman-Review. Thank you so much for talking with us about what you're seeing in this race. Again, the ballot drop boxes close at 8 o'clock tonight in Washington state, so if you haven't turned in your ballot yet, you do still have time. KHQ's Stephanie Stevenson has been set up at ballot boxes today, checking in on voters. Stephanie, it's been a pretty big turnout so far. How are people feeling?
At the elections office, where it's not too late to cast your vote. As long as you get here by 8 o'clock, just pull up right along this election ballot drop-off, and it only takes a few seconds to get your vote in. And today I met with a man who was fired up about this election, even though he's voted in all of them. Take a listen.
I have not missed an election in my life, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Ever since you were 18?
Ever since I was 18, and that's
Wow.
like 40-some years.
And if you can't make it to the elections office, there are some other places you can go. Try the STA Transit Plaza, the North Spokane Library, Spokane South Hill Library, Center Place Event Center, and the Cheney Library. If you make it to any of those places by 8 o'clock, your vote will still count. Live in Spokane, I'm Stephanie Stevenson with KHQ Local News.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much. Glad to see so many people are going to the ballot boxes today, turning in their vote, making it count. Now, of course, one of the biggest races that we're following tonight is the race for the 5th Congressional District in Washington State between Congresswoman Cathy McMorris-Rodgers and her Democratic challenger Lisa Brown. And for that, a closer look at that race, we go now to Joe McHale, who's been following both of them today. Joe?
Well, thanks, Claire. The Spokane's elections office says so far voters are making for record turnout. The 5th Congressional District race between Lisa Brown and Cathy McMorris-Rodgers is forcing the election office to bring in more workers than usual. As of 8 o'clock this morning, more than half of the registered voters in Spokane County had mailed in their ballots. Both candidates spent most of the day canvassing neighborhoods and making last-minute phone calls, all for that final push to get people to vote. Now, speaking of voting, if you're dropping your ballot off in the mailboxes, be sure to check the drop time so that your ballot doesn't get picked up late. As for where the two candidates will be tonight, challenger Lisa Brown will hold a watch party at Riverside Place Auditorium. Doors will open around 7 o'clock, and Brown is expected to speak between 8:30 and 8:45. The building holds 1,400 people, and the event is free to the public. An incumbent, Cathy McMorris-Rodgers, will host an election night party in the Grand Ballroom at the Davenport Grand Hotel. Doors open at 6 o'clock, and Cathy is expected to speak at around 9:45. Now, McMorris-Rodgers won the primary election in August, but by a narrow margin. This race is expected to be her closest in her 14 years in office. In the newsroom tonight, I'm Joe McHale, KHQ Local News.
All right, Joe, thank you. And now we want to bring in Jim Camden from the Spokesman-Review. Jim, there are also several big statewide initiatives on the ballot in Washington State. Can you give us a quick rundown of what we're voting on?
Sure, there are 4. Doing them numerically, Initiative 940 it has to do with the use of deadly force by law enforcement officers, and it would change some of the standards for investigating those cases. Initiative 1631 it has to do with a carbon fee that would be placed on fossil fuels. You'd see an increase in your gas prices and your utility bills if that passes. It's taken some pretty heavy hits from the oil companies that have spent about $30 million against it. Initiative 1634 has to do with whether or not local governments can pass local taxes on certain items, soda and other groceries. Now there is a soda tax in Seattle that sort of instigated all of this, although because it's a statewide initiative, it doesn't repeal the Seattle soda tax. And then 1639 is a gun control ordinance. It would make it harder for people to buy semi-automatic rifles. It would move the age for purchasing up from 18 to 21 and require a more extensive background check. And it would also have some requirements for safe storage in your home.
Gotcha. All right. Well, can you sort of explain to us maybe how you think the campaigns for each of the initiatives has really influenced what the outcome might be tonight?
Well, there's been a lot of money spent on several of these. Like I said, on 1631, the oil companies, primarily the oil companies anyway, have ponied up about $30 million to fight this one. There have been some environmental groups that haven't raised that much, but they've got about 2/3 of that, I think, that they've spent. The 16 and you've probably gotten at least a mailer a day in your mailbox on the 1631 campaign if you up until the time that you voted. On 1634, most of the money has been spent by the pro side, primarily funded by Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, some soft drink companies. They've made a point of calling this a grocery tax. There are no ideas to try and put a tax on, say, vegetables or fruit or meat anywhere in Washington State, or in fact anywhere in the country for a local tax. But I think that they have hit on the idea that calling it a grocery tax rather than a soda tax probably plays a little bit better out there. And they have a almost non-existent campaign against them. One of the problems that they have, though, it's kind of a confusing initiative. So if you don't want these kinds of taxes imposed locally, you have to vote yes on the initiative. People who are for them vote no. The campaign on 1639 has been a little bit it has kind of gotten pushed off the wayside by the more expensive campaigns. There hasn't been a very strong campaign against this, even though there's several campaign committees. They just haven't raised in the seven figures to fight the campaign. The pro side on 1631, safe communities, safe schools. They have some big donors, and so they've had a pretty good push on for that. But more than anything, I think what helps people decide on this are some of the large mass shooting incidents that we've had in recent years. 940 is a tough one because it was initially an initiative to the legislature. There were some problems with it that the legislature found. They tried to come up with an alternative. They passed the alternative. They passed the initiative. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that under the Constitution. The Supreme Court ordered the original initiative onto the ballot, but not the alternative because it wasn't handled properly. So there's a lot of confusion on that, and I suspect that whatever happens tonight on Initiative 940, the legislature is going to have to come in and try and clean that up.
Gotcha. Well, I know a lot of these topics are very much on the front of people's minds, so we'll be watching closely. Is there anything else that you are specifically watching for tonight?
Well, I'm going to be watching to see how the makeup of the legislature shakes out. Right now, it's very close margins in both the House and the Senate for Democrats. 1 vote in the Senate, 2 votes in the House. I'm going to be looking to see if that flips and Republicans take one house or both houses, or if the Democrats grow their margins. The prognostication is for the Democrats to pick up a few seats over on the west side. We have some close races in the 6th district here, so that could all play into it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Jim Camden, thank you so much for speaking with us. We'll be watching for your reporting this evening.
My pleasure.
And of course, we have a very busy night for you here at KHQ. We want to clear up some things for you. So not only are we tracking the election, Gonzaga also plays tonight. And you can watch KHQ Local News at 5 o'clock on your TV. And then you can watch the game. It tips off at 6, also on KHQ. But we're not dropping the ball on politics. Our continuous election coverage starts at the same time as the game on KHQ.com, Facebook, and the KHQ Local News app for your smartphone or smart TV. Between 8 and 8:30, we expect to get our first round of local results, and we will have team coverage of those and the national races throughout the night. Then at 11 o'clock, we have a full recap of who won, who lost, and what is still up in the air. That's on KHQ Local News 11 at 11. We hope you will stay tuned tonight for all of our election coverage. I'm Claire Graham for KHQ Local News.